In the world of hip-hop, few names carry as much weight as Sean Combs. For decades, he was untouchable, a mogul, a hitmaker, a man who seemed to exist above the rules that governed everyone else. But behind the champagne toasts and the white parties, behind the platinum records and the billion-dollar deals, something else was happening. Something that would take years to surface. And now, a documentary has pulled back the curtain. What it reveals is not just a story about one man. It is a story about power, about silence, about what happens when the people who have been quiet for far too long finally decide to speak. This is the story of 10 hidden truths, 10 mysteries that the documentary brought into the light. And by the end, you will understand why the empire that took decades to build came crashing down in a matter of months. Let us begin. Truth number 1. The empire built on shadows. The first truth is perhaps the most unsettling, because it asks us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about how Sean Combs became who he was. The official story is familiar to most of us. A young man from Harlem with enormous ambition. A hustler who worked his way up from an internship at Uptown Records. A visionary who founded Bad Boy Entertainment and changed the sound of an entire generation. Talent, hard work, vision. That was the narrative. But the documentary suggests there was another side to this rise. A darker architecture that operated in the shadows while the public saw only the glittering surface. Former employees describe an atmosphere where secrecy was not just expected. It was demanded. Information was kept compartmentalized. People only knew what they needed to know. And those who wanted access to the inner circle had to prove something first. They had to prove they could keep quiet. The documentary presents testimony from individuals who describe a culture of fear running parallel to the culture of success. Artists allegedly signed contracts that made it nearly impossible to leave. Staff members learned quickly that certain questions should never be asked. And reputation management was not just a department. It was a way of life. Now, we should be careful here. The music industry of the 1990s was notorious for exploitation. Unfair deals and power imbalances existed at many labels. So the question becomes, was what happened at Bad Boy unique? Or was it simply the industry standard taken to an extreme? The documentary argues it was something more, something systematic, something designed. And if that is true, then the empire we celebrated for so long was built on foundations most of us never saw. Truth number 2. The missing days nobody can explain. Every life has gaps, periods that go undocumented, moments that fade from memory. But the documentary identifies something different in the timeline of Sean Combs. It identifies specific windows of time where the public record goes strangely quiet, and where witnesses claim events occurred that never made it into any official account. These are not ordinary gaps. These are periods where multiple people interviewed separately describe similar things. Gatherings that were never reported. Incidents that were allegedly witnessed by many but discussed by none. Sudden changes in behavior among those closest to Combs that no one could explain. The years between 1999 and 2001 receive particular attention. The Club New York shooting and the trial that followed are well documented, of course. But the documentary suggests that what surrounded those events, the before and the after, remains poorly understood. Witnesses describe being warned not to discuss certain timeframes. Legal records from these periods show sealed documents and complaints that were withdrawn without explanation. And when researchers tried to piece together what happened during these missing days, they found doors that simply would not open. Now, we must be honest about the limitations here. Memory is unreliable. The absence of records does not necessarily mean something sinister. Famous people often have periods of reduced visibility for perfectly innocent reasons. But the consistency of what witnesses describe is difficult to dismiss. Too many people, with no apparent connection to one another, telling versions of the same story. Something happened during those missing days. The documentary cannot tell us exactly what, but it makes clear that the full truth has not yet been told. Truth number 3. The private footage that was never meant to be seen. If testimony is the foundation of this documentary, then footage is its backbone. We are not talking about interviews or reenactments. We are talking about actual recordings. Videos that were allegedly never meant to be seen by the public. Clips that capture moments which contradict everything Sean Combs presented to the world. The documentary reportedly includes security camera footage from various properties, personal videos recorded by individuals within his orbit, some apparently without his knowledge, and confessional moments where Combs himself allegedly makes statements that take on devastating significance in light of what we now know. But one piece of footage stands above the rest. In 2016, a surveillance camera in a hotel captured Sean Combs assaulting his then-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. For years, that recording existed somewhere, waiting, and when it finally emerged, it changed everything. The documentary uses that video as more than evidence of a single incident. It uses it as proof of pattern. The filmmakers argue that what we see in that footage is not an aberration. It is a documented example of behavior that allegedly repeated itself over and over again, behind closed doors, for years. Seeing is different from hearing. When allegations exist only as words, they can be doubted. They can be explained away. They can be dismissed as exaggeration or misunderstanding. But when you watch something happen with your own eyes, when you see the aggression, the desperation, the violence, it becomes impossible to look away. The documentary understands this, and it uses visual evidence to transform abstract accusations into undeniable reality. Truth number 4. Silent victims who finally speak. For years, they said nothing. Some were employees who witnessed things they knew were wrong but felt powerless to report. Some were artists whose careers depended on staying in the good graces of the most powerful man in hip-hop. Some were intimate partners who endured abuse in private while the world saw only glamour. They stayed silent because they were afraid. Afraid of losing their jobs. Afraid of losing their careers. Afraid, in some cases, of losing their lives. But in this documentary, they finally speak. Former staff members describe what they saw behind closed doors. They talk about incidents they hid because they did not know who to trust. They explain how the power differential between a billionaire mogul and an unknown employee created barriers that felt impossible to overcome. Former artists describe pressure to participate in things that made them uncomfortable. They talk about feeling like hostages to their contracts. They explain how their dreams of success became chains that bound them to silence. And then there are the intimate partners. Beyond Cassie Ventura, whose lawsuit opened the floodgates, others have come forward with their own accounts. Their testimonies are often the most emotionally intense portions of the documentary. Their pain is palpable. Their relief at finally being heard is visible. The documentary handles the question of delayed reporting with care. Experts explain why victims of powerful people often wait years or even decades before coming forward. Fear of retaliation, financial dependency, the normalization of abuse over time, shame, self-blame, a belief that no one would believe them anyway. These are not excuses. They are explanations, and they help us understand why the silence lasted as long as it did. What matters now is that the silence is broken. And once people start talking, once the first voices find the courage to speak, others follow. That is exactly what happened here. Truth number 5. The financial puzzle. Follow the money. That is what investigators say when they want to uncover the truth about powerful people. Because money leaves trails. Money tells stories. And money, more than almost anything else, reveals what people are really trying to hide. The documentary ventures deep into financial territory that may ultimately prove the most significant in legal proceedings. What it uncovers is a complex web of transactions that raise serious questions about how far the cover-ups extended. We are talking about settlements. Numerous settlements reached with accusers over the years, each accompanied by strict confidentiality requirements. Settlements are legal, of course. They happen all the time. But the volume and pattern described in the documentary suggest something more than isolated dispute resolution. They suggest systematic problem management. Beyond formal settlements, witnesses describe informal payments, cash, gifts, financial benefits provided to maintain silence or reward loyalty. These transactions, by their very nature, leave minimal paper trails. They exist in shadow. The documentary also examines corporate structures that allegedly obscured where money came from and where it went. Layers of business entities. Complex arrangements that legitimate accountants would recognize, but that also happen to make tracing funds extremely difficult. And then there are references to offshore accounts. International financial arrangements that raise questions about jurisdiction and transparency. Now, we should be cautious here. Financial matters are complicated. Transactions can look suspicious when presented by people building a particular case, even when those transactions are perfectly legitimate. Without independent forensic analysis, viewers should treat these allegations as claims requiring verification. But if what the documentary suggests is true, if there really was a sophisticated system designed to buy silence and hide the truth, then the legal implications are enormous. Because patterns of financial cover-up can support racketeering charges. And racketeering charges carry consequences that go far beyond any single incident. Truth number 6. The circle within the circle. Every powerful person has an inner circle. A group of trusted individuals who see what the public never sees. Who know what the public never knows. Sean Combs was no exception. But what the documentary reveals is a circle that has fractured. Some remain fiercely loyal, defending him even now. Others have broken their silence in ways that are nothing short of devastating. Former associates describe a hierarchical system of access. At the outer edge were business contacts and industry acquaintances who only ever saw the public persona. Closer in were managers and executives who understood operations but claim limited knowledge of personal matters. Then came the true inner circle. A small group privy to private life, expected to maintain absolute discretion. And at the very center, an even smaller group described by some witnesses as more than observers. As participants, those who remain loyal offer various explanations for their continued support. Some genuinely believe in his innocence. Some have financial or career ties that make separation difficult. Some fear what might happen if they are seen as disloyal. And some simply cannot reconcile the person they knew with the person being described. But others have chosen a different path. Former Inner Circle members provide detailed accounts of what they claim to have witnessed. They describe their own alleged complicity and the rationalizations that enabled it. They explain how concerning behavior allegedly escalated over time, normalized inch by inch until it seemed almost ordinary. And they express remorse, genuine remorse, for the silence they maintained. The documentary engages thoughtfully with how ordinary people become involved in extraordinary wrongdoing. It is rarely a single decision. It is a series of small compromises, a gradual erosion of boundaries, a growing sense that speaking up would cost more than staying quiet, until one day, staying quiet becomes impossible. Truth number 7. The rivalry that fueled a reckoning. We cannot talk about this documentary without addressing the elephant in the room. Curtis Jackson, better known as 50 Cent, executive producer of the series, and a man with a long, complicated, very public history with Sean Combs. The two have sparred for years. Social media posts mocking Combs, disputes over business, allegations about past incidents, personal insults traded across platforms for everyone to see. This history creates an obvious question. Is this documentary journalism? Is it revenge? Is it commercial opportunism? Or is it somehow all three? The filmmakers apparently handle this tension by having 50 Cent appear minimally in the final product. The focus stays on independent investigators, journalists, and most importantly, victim testimony. The conflict of interest is addressed directly rather than ignored. But questions remain. 50 Cent has repeatedly claimed to possess recordings of Combs that have never been released. The documentary addresses these claims without fully resolving them. What exactly does he have? Why has it not been shown? What remains hidden? We do not get complete answers. Critical viewers should absolutely apply heightened scrutiny to a production with such obvious conflicts of interest. When someone with personal grievances funds an investigation into their enemy, we must ask whether advocacy motivation has contaminated methodology. But here is the other side of that coin. Sometimes, invested parties pursue investigations that more neutral observers would never undertake. 50 Cent's willingness to dedicate resources to this project may have uncovered truths that would otherwise remain buried forever. The key question is not whether he has motivations. Of course he does. The key question is whether the evidence stands on its own. And based on what the documentary presents, much of it appears to. Truth number 8. The mothers, sisters, and friends who disagree. Every story has more than one side. And to its credit, this documentary acknowledges that. Family members and longtime friends of Sean Combs appear in the series to challenge the narrative being constructed. They do not simply offer generic defenses. They offer specific pushback. And their presence creates a sharp, sometimes uncomfortable contrast. Some insist that the person they know is fundamentally different from the one described by accusers. They speak of kindness, generosity, genuine relationships built over decades. They describe a man who helped people, who supported people, who loved people. Others dispute particular facts. They offer alternative explanations. They question the credibility of specific accusers. They argue that context has been stripped away, that consensual situations have been reframed, that industry-wide practices are being unfairly pinned on one individual. And some raise procedural objections about the documentary itself. They argue that Combs was not given adequate opportunity to respond, that exculpatory evidence was excluded, that the filmmakers came to their project with conclusions already formed. This is uncomfortable to watch, because we want stories to be simple. We want clear heroes and villains. We want certainty, but real life is messier than that. Family loyalty in the face of serious allegations is a documented psychological phenomenon. People closest to accused individuals genuinely struggle to reconcile what they have personally witnessed with public accusations. They possess real evidence of positive character. They face their own emotional stakes. The documentary's decision to include these voices may actually strengthen its overall impact, because it demonstrates a willingness to engage with complexity rather than presenting a one-sided prosecution. Neither victim testimony nor family defense should be automatically credited or dismissed. The truth, as always, requires weighing multiple perspectives against each other and against the evidence. Truth number 9. The legal walls closing in. For years, it seemed like nothing could touch Sean Combs. Allegations would surface, then disappear. Lawsuits would be filed, then settled quietly. Life would continue as before, but something changed, and the documentary traces exactly how the legal walls began closing in. It started with Cassie Ventura's lawsuit in November of 2023. The allegations were explosive. The detail was overwhelming. And unlike previous complaints, this one did not fade into silence. Within weeks, more lawsuits followed. Then more. Each new filing added weight. Each new accuser added credibility. The media attention intensified with every development. And then came the video. The hotel surveillance footage showing Combs assaulting Ventura was the tipping point. Suddenly, allegations that could be denied became reality that could be seen. The public response was immediate and devastating. But the documentary reveals that federal investigators had been working for far longer than the public knew. Months of identifying potential witnesses. building relationships, encouraging disclosure, issuing subpoenas for financial records and communications across multiple jurisdictions. The raids came in March of 2024. Coordinated searches of properties in Los Angeles and Miami. Homeland Security involvement. The dramatic nature of these operations sent a clear message. This was not about typical assault allegations. This was something much bigger. The charges eventually filed tell the story. Sex trafficking, transportation for purposes of prostitution, racketeering conspiracy, racketeering, the same framework used against organized crime families. A legal approach that allows prosecutors to demonstrate patterns of behavior rather than proving each individual incident beyond reasonable doubt. The documentary features legal experts who break down what these charges mean, the potential sentences, the difficulty of defense, the significance of being held without bail. The man who once seemed invincible now sits in a cell, denied release twice, facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. The walls did not just close in, they collapsed. Truth number 10. The man behind the myth. The final episodes of the documentary attempt something more ambitious than legal analysis. They attempt to answer a question that may have no complete answer. Who is Sean Combs, really? For decades, we saw a carefully constructed image. The flashy suits, the lavish parties, the champagne and success. The man who turned bad boy entertainment into an empire. The man who discovered and launched some of the greatest talents in hip-hop history. The man who seemed to have everything. But behind every public persona is a private person. And the gap between those two can be vast. The documentary explores patterns suggested by testimony. An alleged need for control that extended into every aspect of life. Volatility that swung between extraordinary charm and frightening aggression. Difficulty accepting rejection or defiance of any kind. Boundaries that allegedly eroded over time. Behavior that escalated as power grew and consequences diminished. These observations come from witnesses, not professional diagnosticians. We should hold them with appropriate care. But when multiple people across multiple decades describe similar experiences, the patterns become difficult to ignore. The final moments of the documentary meditate on legacy. What happens when everything a person built faces fundamental reassessment? Can contributions to music and culture be separated from alleged personal conduct? What do we owe to complicated figures who have both given and allegedly taken? There are no easy answers. What remains, stripped of the celebrity aura, is a man confronted by the weight of his own choices. Real or alleged, proved or disputed. A man whose story is still being written, but whose ending has already begun to take shape. The myth has been shattered. What replaces it? Only time will tell. And so we come to the end of our journey through these 10 hidden truths. What have we learned? We have learned that power, unchecked, can corrupt in ways both spectacular and mundane. We have learned that silence, maintained long enough, can become its own prison. We have learned that footage can destroy what words alone cannot touch. We have learned that inner circles fracture under pressure. That money leaves trails no matter how carefully hidden. That rivalries can produce unexpected reckonings. We have learned that families defend their own, even in the face of overwhelming accusation. That legal systems, slow as they are, eventually turn their attention to those who believe themselves above the law. And we have learned that behind every myth, there is only a man. The documentary does not answer every question. Many mysteries remain. Legal proceedings will continue for months, perhaps years. New revelations may emerge. Old certainties may shift. But one thing is clear. The empire that Sean Combs built over 3 decades is gone. What rises from its ruins? What legacy remains when the trials end and the cameras stop rolling? That story has not yet been written. What we know is that the silence has been broken. The hidden has been revealed. And whatever comes next, nothing will ever be the same.